Hello everyone, good morning. Sometimes the greatest source of our stress is not what is happening around us, but our need to control it. We want to control outcomes, people, timing, and circumstances. We want guarantees before we move forward. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does faith. There will always be moments when things feel uncertain, confusing, or completely out of our hands. And that's not a mistake. That's an invitation from God. Many people don't realize how much emotional and spiritual weight they are carrying until they finally make the decision to let go. Control can feel responsible at first. It can feel like strength, wisdom, and preparation, but over time, it becomes a heavy burden that drains your joy and steals your peace. You begin waking up tired, not because of lack of sleep, but because your mind has been working overtime, trying to manage outcomes that were never yours to control. God never designed you to live like that. Control is heavy, but trust is freedom. When you try to control everything, you slowly step into a role that belongs only to God. You begin worrying about how things will work out, when they will change, and what will happen if they don't. That constant pressure wears you down because deep inside you know you don't have the power to guarantee results. Peace doesn't come from having everything under control. Peace comes from knowing that God is in control. The moment you stop trying to manage what only God can handle, your heart begins to rest. Trust is not pretending that problems don't exist. Trust is acknowledging the problem while believing that God is bigger than it. Trust says, I may not see a way, but God already has one. When you trust God, you're not losing control of your life. You're placing it in the hands of someone who sees the full picture. God knows the end from the beginning. He understands what you can't see, what you don't know, and what hasn't happened yet. Many people hold on tightly because they're afraid. Afraid that if they let go, things will fall apart. Afraid that no one will step in. Afraid that they'll be disappointed again. But what if letting go is the very thing that allows God to step in? What if the breakthrough you're praying for is waiting on your surrender? God often works best when we stop forcing and start trusting. Control keeps you tense, but trust allows you to breathe again. Control keeps your mind racing, but trust quiets your thoughts. Control says everything depends on you, but trust says God is already working on your behalf. When you trust God, you release yourself from the pressure of having to figure everything out. You stop replaying conversations, predicting worst-case scenarios, and worrying about things you cannot change. Trust doesn't mean you stop doing your part. It means you do what you can, and then you rest, knowing God will do what you cannot. You stay faithful, you pray, you walk in integrity, and then you leave the outcome in God's hands. That's where freedom lives. That's where peace is restored. That's where joy returns. Sometimes the very thing you're holding on to is the thing that's holding you back. God may be asking you to release control so he can bring something better into your life. What feels risky to you is often the doorway to growth. When you let go, you make space for God's favor, guidance, and peace to flow freely. Today, God is inviting you to trade control for trust, to lay down the burden you were never meant to carry, to stop striving and start believing. When you trust God, you don't lose anything. You gain peace, clarity, and strength. Control is heavy, but trust is freedom, and God is ready to carry what you've been carrying alone. Many people are exhausted not because they are doing too much, but because they are trying to do what only God can do. They are carrying responsibilities that were never meant to be theirs. They are worrying about outcomes, changing people, and controlling timing, all while wondering why peace feels so far away. God is gentle but clear when he reminds us, do what you can and release what you can't. There is a clear difference between responsibility and control. Responsibility is showing up with faithfulness. Control is trying to guarantee results. God asks us to be obedient, not omnipotent. He never asked you to figure out how everything would work out. He asked you to trust him while you take the steps he places in front of you. When you confuse responsibility with control, you end up frustrated because you're trying to solve problems that require divine intervention. You can pray, but you can't force answers. You can love people, but you can't change their hearts. You can work hard, but you can't control outcomes. These boundaries are not weaknesses. They are reminders that you were created to depend on God. When you respect those boundaries, peace follows. When you cross them, stress takes over. Releasing what you can't control is one of the purest forms of faith. It's saying, God, I trust your wisdom more than my effort. That kind of trust honors God because it acknowledges his authority and power. It says, you believe he is actively involved in your life, not distant or indifferent. Faith grows stronger every time you let go of something that is too big for you. Many answers don't come because we're still holding on too tightly. God often waits for us to release control so he can reveal his plan. When you stop trying to force things, you give God room to move. He begins aligning circumstances, opening doors, and working behind the scenes in ways you never could. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying. You still show up, you still pray, and you still do your best, but you no longer live under the pressure of thinking everything depends on you. You trust that God is working even when you don't see immediate results. One of the hardest things to release is the need for immediate clarity. We want God to show us the entire plan before we take the first step, but faith rarely works that way. God often gives just enough light for the next step. When you take that step, he reveals more. Trust grows as you walk, not before you move. When you release what you can't control, your heart becomes lighter. Your prayers become more peaceful. Your faith becomes deeper. You stop living in constant tension and start living with quiet confidence. You realize that God is capable of handling what overwhelms you. God never asked you to carry the weight of the future. He asked you to walk with him one day at a time. Do what you can today. Trust God with tomorrow. When effort meets surrender, peace takes over. Many people don't realize that their need for control is rooted not in strength, but in fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of losing something they worked hard to build. Fear whispers that if you don't stay in control, everything will fall apart. But fear has a way of exaggerating danger and minimizing God's presence. That's why the more fear you allow into your heart, the tighter you grip everything around you. Control feels like protection, but it often becomes a prison. You replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, and brace yourself for outcomes that haven't even happened. Fear keeps your mind busy, but your spirit tired. God never intended for you to live in that state. He created you to live from faith, not fear. Faith does not mean ignoring reality. Faith means acknowledging reality while believing God has the final say. Faith says, I don't know how this will work out, but I know who holds my future. When faith rises, fear begins to lose its power. You may still feel uncertainty, but it no longer controls your decisions or steals your peace. Every time you choose to release control, you are choosing faith over fear. You are telling God, I trust you more than the possibilities that frighten me. That decision may feel uncomfortable at first because fear thrives on familiarity. But faith grows through obedience. The more you release, the stronger your trust becomes. Fear often tells you to hold on tighter, to stay guarded, to never take risks. Faith tells you to open your hands and let God work. Fear says everything depends on you. Faith says God is already working ahead of you. When you live by faith, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding spiritually. One of fear's greatest lies is that letting go means losing control forever. In reality, letting go places your life in God's care. God is not careless with what you entrust to him. He is attentive, loving, and faithful. He sees details you miss and dangers you never even recognize. Faith rests in the assurance that God's plans are better than your fears. Fear keeps you focused on what could go wrong. Faith keeps you focused on what God can. When fear dominates, peace disappears. When faith leads, peace returns. Even before circumstances change, peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of trust. There will be moments when fear tries to creep back in. That doesn't mean your faith has failed. It simply means you must choose again. Faith is not a one-time decision. It's a daily posture. Each day you decide whether fear or faith will guide your thoughts actions, and expectations. God often calls you to release control, not because he wants to test you, but because he wants to free you. Fear limits, but faith expands. Fear keeps you stuck, but faith moves you forward. When you release control, you step into a life that is led by trust instead of tension. Today, God is inviting you to let faith speak louder than fear, to stop guarding your life with anxiety and start trusting it with God. When faith replaces fear, control loses its grip and peace becomes your new foundation. One of the most difficult things to release to God is timing. We don't just want things to work out. We want them to work out now. We pray and expect quick answers. We do the right things and assume results should follow immediately. When they don't, frustration sets in and pressure begins to rise. But God does not operate under human urgency. He works according to divine wisdom, and his timing is always purposeful. Pressure says everything is falling behind. Faith says nothing is late. What feels like a delay to you may actually be God's protection. There are moments when you're asking God to hurry, not realizing that if he moved things sooner, it could harm you rather than help you. God sees what you cannot see. He knows what you're not ready for yet and what still needs to be aligned behind the scenes. When you try to control timing, you end up forcing doors that God never opened. You rush decisions set, live for less, or step into situations before you're prepared. Later, you look back and realize why God was asking you to wait. Waiting is not punishment, it is preparation. During waiting seasons, God is often strengthening your character, deepening your faith, and teaching you to trust him more fully. God's timing develops patience, and patience produces maturity. If everything happened the moment you wanted it to, your faith would never grow. You would rely on speed instead of trust. But God is more concerned with who you're becoming than how fast things happen. He's shaping you for what he's already planned. Releasing control over timing means trusting God's wisdom over your impatience. It means believing that God knows the right moment to open doors, bring people into your life, and shift circumstances. You may feel ready, but God knows when everything else is ready too. His timing considers every detail, every person, and every consequence. Sometimes the delay is not about you at all. God may be working on someone else, changing a heart, or rearranging circumstances so that when the moment comes, everything fits together perfectly. If God answered too soon, the blessing might not last. When God moves at the right time, nothing can stop what he has planned. Pressure will always push you to rush. Faith invites you to rest. Rest doesn't mean inactivity. It means trusting God while you continue to walk in obedience. You keep praying, serving, growing, and believing, even when progress feels slow. You trust that God is working even when you don't see visible evidence. There will be moments when waiting feels uncomfortable and even painful. But discomfort does not mean God is absent. Often he is closer than ever. Waiting seasons are when God teaches you to rely on him rather than results. They teach you to find peace not in outcomes, but in relationship with him. When you stop pressuring yourself and release timing to God, peace replaces anxiety. You stop asking, why hasn't this happened yet? And start believing God knows exactly when. What God has promised will come to pass. It will not be late, rushed, or incomplete. Trust God's timing. What he has planned for you will arrive at the perfect moment, fully prepared, fully aligned, and better than you imagined. Breakthroughs rarely begin with strength. They usually begin with surrender. Our natural instinct is to push harder, try longer, and hold tighter when we want change. We believe that if we can just do more, think more, or try one last thing, everything will turn around. But many of the greatest moments of transformation happen when we finally admit, God, I can't do this on my own. That moment of surrender is not defeat. It is the doorway to breakthrough. Surrender is often misunderstood. People think it means giving up or losing hope, but in reality, it means placing your hope in the right place. Surrender is choosing trust over control. It's saying, God, I trust your power more than my ability. When you surrender, you stop fighting battles you were never meant to fight, and you allow God to fight for you. There are times when God allows you to reach the end of yourself so you can discover the fullness of his strength. As long as you believe you can manage everything, you may never fully rely on him. But when you finally release your grip, God steps in with clarity, peace, and power. Many breakthroughs are delayed, not because God is unwilling, but because we are unwilling to let go. Often what God asks us to surrender is not the problem itself, but our approach to it. We may need to surrender pride, bitterness, fear, or the need to be right. We may need to release past hurts, unmet expectations, or control over how things should happen. These things quietly block God's work in our lives. When they are released, space is created for healing and restoration. Surrender requires humility. It acknowledges that God's ways are higher and his plans are better. Humility opens the door for God's grace to flow freely. Grace is not earned, it is received. And it is often received most fully when you stop striving and start trusting. Many people are praying for change while still holding tightly to the very things God is asking them to release. They want peace, but they refuse to let go of resentment. They want clarity, but they won't surrender control. They want healing, but they won't release the past. Breakthrough begins when surrender becomes complete. Surrender is not a one-time event, it is a daily choice. Each day you decide whether you will carry the burden yourself or place it in God's hands. Each day you choose whether you will rely on your own strength or trust God's power. Over time, surrender becomes a lifestyle and peace becomes your constant companion. When you surrender, you may not see immediate results, but you will feel immediate peace. That peace is a sign that you've placed the weight where it belongs. God is not overwhelmed by what overwhelms you. He is not intimidated by your circumstances. He is fully capable of handling what you've been carrying alone. Surrender always precedes breakthrough because it aligns your heart with God's will. When your heart is aligned, God's power flows more freely. The moment you let go is often the moment God begins to move in ways you could never orchestrate. Today, God is inviting you to surrender fully. Not because he wants to take something from you, but because he wants to give you something better. When you surrender, you make room for God's best, and that is where true breakthrough begins. Peace is something everyone wants, yet so many people search for it in the wrong places. They look for peace in stable circumstances, answered prayers, and predictable outcomes. But real peace does not come from having everything figured out. It comes from trusting the one who already has it all figured out. Peace is not found in control. Peace is found in letting God lead. When you try to lead your life on your own strength, you carry constant pressure. You feel responsible for every decision, every result, and every possible outcome. That pressure slowly turns into anxiety. But when you let God lead, that pressure lifts. You realize you are not walking alone. God goes before you, walks beside you, and guards what you cannot see. Letting God lead does not mean life becomes easy or problem-free. It means you no longer face challenges with fear and uncertainty. You face them with confidence and calm, knowing God is guiding your steps. When God leads, even detours have purpose. Even delays have meaning. Even closed doors are acts of protection. Many people resist letting God lead because they want clarity before obedience. They want God to show the entire plan before they take the first step. But God often leads one step at a time. He asks you to trust him enough to move forward without seeing the full picture. Faith grows in motion. Each step of obedience builds confidence in God's direction. When God leads, you no longer need to force outcomes. You stop manipulating situations, over-explaining yourself, and striving for approval. You trust that what God has for you will come to you without strain. What is meant for you will not require stress to obtain. God's blessings do not come with anxiety attached. Letting God lead also means learning to listen. It means making space for prayer, reflection, and quiet trust. In a noisy world, God's guidance often comes in stillness. When you slow down and surrender control, you become more sensitive to his direction. Peace grows where trust lives. One of the greatest signs that God is leading your life is peace in your spirit. even when circumstances are uncertain. That peace is not based on logic, it is based on faith. It reassures you that God is in control, even when things don't make sense yet. There will be times when fear tries to convince you to take back control. You may feel tempted to rush ahead or retreat out of uncertainty, but each time you choose to trust God again, peace strengthens. Letting God lead is not about perfection, it's about persistence. God's leadership always leads you toward growth, healing, and purpose. He never leads you into confusion or chaos. When you follow him, your life may not look exactly how you imagined, but it will be richer, deeper, and more meaningful than you ever expected. Today, choose to release the need to control every detail. Choose to trust God with your steps, your timing, and your future. When you let God lead, peace becomes your foundation, confidence becomes your companion, and faith becomes your way forward. ChatGPT CA